After being judged by a court of divine beings, a former human now god named Li Changxin is deemed guilty and sentenced to erasure. His past title, Twilight of the Gods, is taken from him, and he's put to erasure from existence. Instead, through a twist of fate, he wakes in the underworld where he's met by Yule, the place's #1 messenger. After a short scuffle, Yule takes him to meet his master, sailing over the river Styx itself to get there. He explains that since Changxian was born on Earth, his soul was able to be pulled back to Earth's underworld despite his death in the realm of Arcadia. As they near the palace of Thanatos, ruler of Hell, they go past several areas where people are being tortured as punishment for their crimes. To Changxian's shock, this even includes gods and deities of an evil disposition. Once they enter the palace, Yule leads Changxian to the throne room and announces their arrival. As the doors open, Changxian feels a terrible presence staring him down. Thanatos, after thoroughly scaring the crap out of Changxian with a small prank, explains the true reason he's been brought here. He wants Changxian to be his agent in the human world and seal away some rogue gods who've been interfering with the mortal plane against their oaths. Due to restrictions placed on the divine, Thanatos himself can't act against them, but acting through humans is a loophole that can be exploited. To this end, he tells Changxian that he'll be returned to his body in the past and made to become his hunter. In exchange, once the job is done, he'll grant Changxian a new life and pardon his sins. Not only that, he even offers power to help complete the job in the first place. Seeing no reason to refuse, Changxian accepts the deal. After going through the door to past lives, Changxian awakens in the middle of a forest surrounded by confused humans. This is because he hasn't been sent back directly to Earth, but to a dungeon break first. This way, any other deities can be prevented from discovering his reborn status. Getting up, he takes note of the system informing everyone this is the Huari Forest. Their goal is to defeat the area's monsters and get to the hill beyond the forest. As soon as the forest is opened to them, Changxian dashes forward and into the wild, shocking everyone else. A little ways further, he stops to check the special powers Thanatos gave him. Soul Exploitation, which gives him control over souls he's killed and a boost to EXP gain. On top of that, Execution Sword, which he can use to kill guilty deities and take part of their power. For now, though, he puts it away due to the restrictions and his own lack of power. Right then, the first monster to cross his path shows itself in a vicious attack, a giant black mamba. Using his skill and experience, Changxian guts the thing with a simple rusty dagger in his inventory with almost no effort. As he stands over the serpent's corpse, a deity by the name of Good Season to Hunt takes note of him. The purpose of dungeons is to test humans and reveal the strongest ones for gods to recruit as their apostles. The one that's shown an interest in him, Pabalsag, her true name, is a war goddess and daughter of Tiamat, the primordial evil dragon. Deciding to impress her, Li goes on an absolute rampage through the forest, brutalizing every mamba he sees. Pabalsag is quite impressed with Changxian's blade skills and soul extortion. After killing all the mambas, Changxian considers going after the bloody mamba whose fang can be used to get poison immunity. In his first life as a god, poison is what took him down and got him captured, so he quite likes that idea. Before he can go for it, his dagger finally shatters from overuse. From the skies above falls a replacement blade, a weapon of Tiamat herself. Pabalsag has sent it as part of a bet she wishes to make. The only caveat is if he loses, he'll die. Pabalsag's offer reminds Changxian of his hatred for gods and their disregard for mortal lives. For now, though, he'll play along for his mission. He accepts the bet, which is to kill the bloody mamba within 24 hours. As a reward, he can keep Tiamat's blade and become Pabalsag's apostle. Before heading out, he alters the bet. He'll kill the mamba in just 30 minutes, so he wants a better reward. Moving out, Changxian goes on a killing frenzy through the forest and garners the attention of more and more gods. Eventually, once just the bloody mamba is left, Changxian has reached the required level to choose a special class. Unfortunately, the one he wanted, Berserker, is nowhere to be found. Without the Berserker skill, Changxian has to settle for Rune Keeper, which is a very powerful class in its own way. Though the spectating gods laugh at his unusual choice, Changxian remains unaffected. Using his class skills, he engraves an explosive rune on Tiamat's dagger, which is further boosted from his perfect engraving. With the dagger in hand, he dashes at the bloody mamba in a flurry of attacks so vicious that a pillar of light rises up from the slaughter. With that, the mamba is defeated with just moments left on the clock. Thanks to Changxian, the first stage of the dungeon is over, and he's gained 4,999 of the 5,000 points available for it. Changxian returns to the clearing where the other humans are. He sees that they're scared of him, though, and heads into the forest after telling them to handle any remaining monsters. Deep in the woods, Changxian is preparing to butcher the mamba for resources when he's given a list of rewards to pick from for his bet and accomplishments. Rather than getting an item, Changxian cashes all his rewards, including Pabal Sag's apostle job offer, for karma, a currency of sorts. While the other gods are amused by his personality, Pabal Sag is not. For now, though, Changsun has a mamba to mutilate. Right after obtaining the poison fang from the mamba's corpse, Changxian receives a notification that the dungeon's second stage is starting. He realizes this is a filtering event. Since he's doing too well in the dungeon, the admins are raising its difficulty level. Changxian dashes through the forest to get ahead and runs into a fire lizard. He quickly uses his agility to evade its attacks and incapacitates it with a decapitation. From its corpse, he retrieves a fire orb which he swallows for fire energy. This is part of the second stage of gaining poison immunity. A look into Changxian's past reveals that Antares of the 12 zodiacs inflicted him with the curse of Gaia, which poisoned him till he could be taken down. During his time in the underworld, Changxian trained under the zodiac's nemesis, the 10 fallen stars. First Elder, one of the stars, taught Changxian the path to poison immunity, which he's now pursuing. After consuming the fire orbs of several monsters, he realizes they're not enough and goes in search of stronger monsters. During this search, he runs into a little girl being attacked by a bear and saves her. Tearfully, the girl tells him her group was abandoned by a man named John Chungjae and died. After hearing the girl out, Changxian realizes what exactly is happening. Chungjae has been fooled into allying with a demon and is carrying out its bidding. He's giving the other humans a brand under the facade of strengthening them, but it actually steals their vitality and soul when they die. This is how he's been getting stronger, taking the vitality and giving the souls to the demon. Unable to abandon her, Changxian takes the little girl under his wing for now. 3 days later, the duo are using a mix of runes and the girl's Gale Sprint skill to lure monsters in for Changxian to slaughter. Once the latest horde is beaten, Changxian tells her to find a safe spot and wait. The next monsters will be too much for her. Sure enough, what Changxian faces next is none other than the dungeon's final boss, Decomposing Plague Spider. Staring it down as he evades its poisonous secretions, Changxian's eye turns golden and a new power awakens. The deity, Jormungandr, has temporarily granted Changxian the skill Viper Eyes to gauge his potential. Deciding to impress him, Changxian gets to work. Using the firepower he's absorbed, he burns away the poison in his system and prepares to attack. Using Viper Eyes, he finds the spider's weak spot and attacks. Immediately, he follows up with an attack to the spot where the spider's venom glands are, since he needs them to gain poison immunity. When he realizes the spider's shell is too hard to pierce, he moves to Plan B. Changxian lures the spider away to another area where he set traps earlier with the kid's help. Moments later, the boss is assaulted with all manners of torture, from burning alive to being impaled. Meanwhile, Jormungandr is laughing his ass off. Eventually, the bombardment of traps weakens the spider's defenses enough that Changxian is able to get in a ton of critical hits with his blade. As the boss collapses, Changxian nabs its venom glands and bites right into them before falling to his knees as well. As he sits there and a poison cloud spews from his mouth, the dungeon is cleared and the rewards start tallying. Changxian has secured over 97% of the points. It's not time to celebrate yet, though. As Changxian sits in place, he's suddenly ambushed by John Chungjae and his followers. However, as they draw near, something begins to frighten them. Even in his current state, Changxian has a terrifying smirk on his face. Worse, the system has a notification for them. John Chungjae and his men have fallen into a trap. What follows beyond that is an absolute massacre. In a bloody dance of violence, Changxian easily dispatches all of the humans that come his way. At one point, he slices right into Chungjae's arm and sends him tumbling and yelling for help. At one point, Chungjae tries to use his brand and absorb his fallen followers' power, but it fails. Instead, as the slaughter continues, he's shocked to see it's all flowing into Changxian instead. His spirit crushed, Chungjae starts raging about how Changxian has always been above him and looked down on others. It turns out he's a salty esports player that got booted off his team by Changxian in the past. Disappointed in how pathetic he's acting, Chang Xian finally puts an end to his life with a simple slash of his blade, separating Chungjae's body and head. With Chungjae's defeat, all the absorbed power exits his body and flows into Chang Xian. It turns out the little girl he saved, who was also branded, has a part in this. Chang Xian altered her brand so she would receive energy instead of Chungjae. On top of that, he layered it with a gateway rune that then sends the energy to him since her body can't handle it. This greatly impresses both Jormungandr and the demon responsible himself. Said demon then offers Chang Xian a reward of sorts and proceeds to siphon the vitality of every remaining human. To everyone's shock, Chang Xian refuses the offer, saying he can't trust someone whose name he doesn't even know. In response, the demon reveals himself as Mephistopheles, the great abyss-chasing demon, one of even greater power than Tiamat herself. Though he's shaken, Chang Xian keeps a straight face. He manages to avoid further interaction as Pabalsag starts arguing with Mephistopheles over who has dibs on him. Soon enough, the dungeon closes as everything has been cleared. Before exiting, Chang Xian tosses a bone to the little girl he helped with an address on it. There, she can have her brand removed completely. Once everyone spat back into the human world, the girl finds herself wondering where her savior disappeared to. That night, Chang Xian sits under the moon and takes in the starry night sky he's missed for so long. For better or worse, he's back. Making his way through town, Chang Xian ponders his current predicament. Thanks to his achievements, he's caught the attention of several gods who wish to be his protection star. This is a role that gods play for any human powerful enough to prove worthy. Once a person picks a god, they receive several perks that put them far ahead of those who don't have one. Chang Xian's most notable offers come from Mephistopheles, Jormungandr, Pabalsag, and surprisingly enough, Minerva herself. However, to the shock and disgust of all the gods, he turns the offers down to remain a free agent. Later that day, Chang Xian steps through the doors of a place he hasn't seen in centuries. Stepping in, he's met with the sight of his mother cooking kimchi stew. From inside the apartment, a dog bounds up to him and glomps on as well. After so many years by himself, after so much suffering, Chang Xian is finally home. At dinner, Chang Xian remembers the negatives of his first life as well, having only thought of what he missed for so long. With a distant family and a father who barely bats an eye at him outside of disappointment, he certainly doesn't miss this aspect of his life. A confrontation opens his eyes, though, and makes him realize he was at fault too. With this in mind, he apologizes to his mother and starts getting his act together. Frankly, even he's shocked by what a pitiful life he led the first time around. After cleaning his room, Chang Xian thinks on what to do next. The first target Thanatos assigned for him is actually nearby, Empty Tiger, one of the key figures in his divine trial. Fueled by rage, Chang Xian studies an ad for his clan, White Tiger, which will recruit new players soon. Knowing he needs to be subtle, Chang Xian decides he'll slowly take them down from the inside. Within the next month, he'll make all the necessary arrangements for that goal. Later, Chang Xian heads out and goes deep into a forest. Here, he puts up a barrier around himself and begins the process to gain poison immunity. In a horrific display, he absorbs all the toxic items obtained from the dungeon and brings himself near death as the gods watch in concern. Then, at the last moment, he lights an ancient flame that burns away his toxins and makes him reborn with a new skill set. On top of 10 poison immunity, he now has the fire element, and all his energy pathways have been opened. After that, Chang Xian heads to the address of a blacksmith recommended by Thanatos. Since his specialty as a god was weapons mastery, he needs all the weapons he can get. But when he gets to the address, all he sees is a rundown and abandoned store. Despite its appearance, Chang Xian can clearly smell the scent of divine fire from inside. Clearly, the forge in this smith is frequently lit up. With a quick show of strength, he forces up the shutters and enters. Inside, he sees a room full of high-quality weaponry, something that practically makes Pabalsag drool. Despite it all, Chang Xian's attention is drawn to a single rusty sword-shaped stick. Pabalsag criticizes his choice, but he senses something within it. Just then, a man walks in from a back room, specifically, a blind man with a support dog. Despite his insistence that he's no blacksmith, Chang Xian manages to convince him to work for him. Money's a hell of a motivator for broke folks. Sitting down to hammer out the details of their contract, Chang Xian talks the blacksmith into creating a ridiculous number of weapons for him, as well as a bow and armor later. Unfortunately, there's one major problem. The hammer used in the forge was stolen by the smith's fellow apprentice. The apprentice, Jin Dae-hwan, was recruited by one of the top 10 clans, High Off, in their pursuit to clear the secret dungeon disguised as a tomb in Mount Banghwa. Deciding to fix this himself, Chang Xian heads out. That night, he arrives at the tomb and spots several clan members standing guard outside. Minerva grants him the unwavering heart skill for putting down such evil people. Chang Xian equips a mask to hide his identity, and with a quick application of ice abilities he picked up in the poison immunity ritual, freezes them all. His research showed him the clan is into all kinds of heinous activities, so he adds blood poisoning into the ice, leaving them to die slowly. Minerva, Jormungandr, and Pabilsag have varying reactions, but mostly in the positive. Once he's inside the Tomb of Bestla, the dungeon mission to escape with the boss's treasure begins. But first, Chang Xian calls out a hidden presence that even the gods didn't notice. The administrator from his first dungeon is here. In return for letting the admin, Herald, write Chang Xian's progress report, he secures a blank favor from him in the near future. To Herald's shock, he seals this deal with a covenant of mana which steals the mana of any party that breaks it. From there, Herald only gets more and more overwhelmed with just how insanely advanced Chang Xian's knowledge and skills are. Seeing them, he can understand why all the 12 constellations are intrigued by him. At one point, Herald can't help but liken Chang Xian to another man, he who had fallen, the man to mock gods to their face and kill several more, the one known as Twilight of the Gods. Quickly moving through the dungeon, Chang Xian finds a gruesome sight. The pile of corpses High Off have used as sacrifices in the ritual to open the final door. Disgusted, Chang Xian moves forward and finds some members escorting the latest batch of sacrifices. Instantly, he flash freezes the lot except one who he then tortures for info. After that, he skewers the guy with a tiger fang from the previous dungeon and uses soul extortion on his corpse. Over the next few minutes, Chang Xian goes on a warpath, killing every single member of High Off he sees. Finally, only one is left in the entrance chamber of the final room, Lee Jaseung. Watching his allies' statuses disappear one after the other, he's terrified when his assistant walks in like a zombie. With his last words about a ghost spoken, he explodes in a blinding flash of light and leaves Jaseung burned and poisoned. On the brink of death, he sees one notification as Chang Xian dashes towards him. Death is approaching. Despite his condition, Jaseung manages to rise and put up a fight. Unfortunately for him, it's not much of one. As expected, Chang Xian absolutely destroys him, even mocking him at one point with an empty antidote bottle for his poisoning. Though he's interested in the man's ability to keep fighting, Chang Xian has a job to do, and so he finishes Jaseung with a brutal flurry of slashes. Using soul extraction, he disposes of the body and recovers some HP. Impressed with his righteous deeds, Minerva grants him another ability, Inner Peace. Internally, Chang Xian can only be amused at how the gods are helping him, the one who was once considered an evil god. From there, Chang Xian reaches the boss room door and kills a hiding Dae-hwan. He retrieves the hammer from his body and learns it was forged from a meteor many years ago. That aside, it's now time to enter the boss room that's been locked for years. Suddenly, he calls out for Herald and tells him it's time to honor their agreement. He has to open the door. With an extreme level of reluctance, Herald opens the door as asked. Inside, Chang Xian faces off against none other than the embodiment of Bestla's thoughts themselves. The challenge of this boss room is to withstand the mental attacks that hit him and prevent his body from being stolen. Outside, Herald is celebrating that Chang Xian will fail due to how insulted he feels. Unfortunately for him, just moments later, the dungeon is cleared and the countdown to its closure begins. Minerva's blessings on top of Chang Xian's own ability were just too much for Bestla to defeat. Back at the Choi blacksmith shop, Chang Xian returns the hammer to Choi and tells him to have a hammer, whip, and lance ready in a month. Before he leaves, he also strong-arms Choi into selling the rusty sword he took an interest in, which turns out to be a family heirloom. On his way home, Chang Xian thinks back to Thanatos' info about Choi. Inheriting the name Uyezi, he's the latest in a long line of legendary blacksmiths capable of forging weapons that are one of a kind. Between Choi and Chang Xian, the Uyezi name will blossom in the modern age. In a taxi heading to his home, Chang Xian wonders why the artifact he received from the dungeon, the one protected by the boss, was Peter's key. Meanwhile, the High Off clan's raid manager is in shambles at hearing the key's been taken by an outsider. Their parent group, White Tiger, will destroy him if word gets out. After exiting the taxi, Changxian walks through a park while examining the rusty sword he brought. As far as he can tell, this is the Yuchang sword, one of the 9 famous blades forged by the original Uyezi over which wars have been fought in the past. Between this and Tiamat's dagger, he has the 2 most powerful weapons in the world. While listening to Pabalsag whining about the sword being trash, Changxian senses something. Keeping cool, he subtly summons his bone spear and chucks it at full speed. His spear lands in a tree, inches away from the head of a man who was watching him. Angry at being spied on, Changxian engages him in a sword fight. Unable to keep up with Changxian, the other man decides to go all out after spending some time on the defense. Right before their full powers clash, though, he drops his sword and surrenders, not wanting this to go too far out of hand. As the two start talking, Changxian learns he's become rather famous among clans around the world who want to recruit him. This man, Wu Yonggun, is the same for his clan, 5-Star Sword. Realizing Changxian is upset, he wisely backs off and tells him he'll come back another time. As he leaves, Changxian realizes something. If what he said is true, and even Yonggun is this close to his home, there might be recruiters in his apartment too. Worried for his mother, he rushes home, unaware of the blood dripping down Yonggun's arm from their clash. Back at home, Changxian's mom asks him if he has something to say.
Hey, wait a sec. Are you subscribed? We'll make sure you do, and hit that notification button.
Taking a breath, Changxian tells her he does. 1 month later, Changxian awakens from a dream of his past as the twilight of the gods. Today is the day of White Tiger's recruitment trial. It's time to start taking action. After arriving at White Tiger's entrance trial, Changxian instantly gets everyone's attention when his magic power is measured at SSS+++ rank. By the time he reaches the first trials area, he's appeared in the media, being hailed as the resurrected tyrant, since he recently retired from pro gaming in his first life. His examiner informs Changxian the first trial involves fighting simulated monsters. Seeing Huju, the tiger deity that had a big hand in his divine trial, Changxian tells him to give him their strongest monster. This turns out to be a drake, shocking everyone that he's facing such a powerful beast. As it charges towards him, though, Changxian shows a massive, menacing smirk. Opening the case on his back, Changxian unveils the fruits of Uyezi's labor this past month. An incredible 2-part spear that can be split apart or used as one, and a whip that coils around his wrist. Chucking the spear forward, he pierces the drake's eye and then pulls the spear back with the whip. Then, following a flurry of attacks, Changxian leaps up and pierces the drake's skull with his spear. Finally, using blood poison, he paralyzes the beast and blows it apart with a final attack. As his level rises, Changxian stares at Huju. Suddenly, he's attacked by a team leader of White Tiger who wishes to gauge his power. Before things can get too serious, the man is attacked by another team leader with the same idea. Before anyone knows it, another 2 have joined in as they fight over who will recruit Changxian. Meanwhile, the man in question is smiling, hoping he gets to see some bloodshed. The clan's second-in-command, Oh Si-hwan, appears to end the dispute. As he flares his presence, even Changxian is stunned by his power, knowing he can't beat the man yet. Si-hwan, on the other hand, dupes his underlings and slyly takes Changxian for himself, ushering him to his office. There, they discuss their terms after Changxian changes into the very clothes he wears as the Twilight of Gods. It's decided Changxian will join the Future Strategies Department under Si-hwan if he can prove himself. To do that, he must set a record in the blackish Red Mountain Range dungeon and even clear it. From Si-hwan's reaction, Changxian is sure there's something special there. Before leaving, he asks for access to White Tiger's library to prepare. Over the next few days, Changxian is all anyone can talk about across the internet. His reputation has skyrocketed immensely. A few days later, Changxian arrives at the mountain range and looks on it, thinking he must cleanse it all. Up in the clouds where the mountain's peak reaches, he spots something stunning. The massive wing of an absolutely majestic creature perched there. The creature is one of 8 organisms corrupting the mountain range with negative energy. Changxian's job is to eliminate them all. As he moves to get started, he notices a man following him from a short distance, spying on Si-hwan's behalf. Thinking back, Changxian remembers the guy's been tailing him throughout the past days that he spent at the library. There, he's been searching for the secret to Advent Steps, the divine ability that made Sagittarius one of the Zodiac. Though he's unable to find Advent Step, Changxian does use his several mental buffs in combination to learn copious amounts of knowledge. This includes info on Huju, which allows him to start recreating Huju's martial technique of destruction and learn his weaknesses. He also switches locations in the library and locates a disguised book he believes to be the Advent Step. Appearing to be a cookbook, its secrets are revealed only when read upside down, backwards, and in a specific pattern. To his shock, though, this book isn't Advent Step, it's something else entirely. Inside this book is the story of Hanyu of the Ilmun clan. In the past, he was betrayed by Gum Chunho, his pupil and one of the founders of the White Tiger clan. Huju was once bound to the Ilmun clan, but Hanyu's peaceful ways went against his own desires, and so he conspired with Chunho to kill him. It turns out, Chunho slowly poisoned him over the course of a long time, leaving him unable to fight on the day he was stabbed in the back. The only mercy he was afforded was being sealed in a cave of the Ilmun clan instead of being killed. Spending his days in misery, Hanyu eventually heard a voice. The recollection ends there, confusing Changxian. Even stranger, he gets rewarded just for finding the book with a bump in his completion rate for Huju's skill. Quickly, Changxian deduces the other books holding the rest of the story must be here and sets out on a 2-hour quest to locate them all. Despite some crappy luck at first, Changxian finally discovers what he's been looking for. In the rest of Hanyu's books, Changxian learns of how he was guided by a priest with a similar story to his own. With that man's guidance, he escaped and went on a crusade to kill his betrayers, but was unsure if he could kill Chunho, who he raised as his son. So he left this record of his life in hopes that the one to read it may complete his revenge. With a burning desire for justice in his heart, Changxian receives the skill Black Mountain's Monarch Claw. Despite its incredible abilities, though, he barely has enough magic energy right now to create a single claw. Regardless, it's an incredible find since it comes from the same roots as White Tiger's skills. Now, in the blackish red mountain range, he enters the starting point of the trial where all the other hopefuls are. Among them, he takes note of a man named Baek Gyeowul. Wu Yonggon is in a panicked state due to his failure to recruit Changxian. Meanwhile, his niece Hyabin, the reason for his desire to get Changxian in the first place, is pissed at him. That's the little girl Changxian saved for anyone who forgot. Over at the mountain range, the test's rules are explained. For the next 30 days, examinees will be taught the 3 basic skills of White Tiger. Then, for 70 days, they must survive in the dungeon while killing as many monsters as possible. To everyone's shock, Changxian claims he already learned the skills and wants to go right to the second stage. When people start showing doubts, he simply demonstrates what he said. Without a moment of hesitation, he activates Tiger's aura, step, and even calamity. After thoroughly shocking everyone present, Changxian gets permission to enter the mountain range's forest. As he enters, he notes that Huju is quite open with his excitement about Changxian's potential. After getting a little deeper, Changxian applies some of his skills to make the harsh, negative, and corrupted environment tolerable. Sensing a monster, he quickly fires an attack that takes it out. In its place, several more appear, proving to Changxian he was right. This place is teeming with one-legged ghosts, which means what he's after is here too. For now, though, he wants to test out the Black Mountain Monarch's Claw. With the Monarch's Claw, Changxian blows away all the ghosts, but finds he was right about the mana cost being too high. For now, he has to raise his magic power. In this pursuit, he raises the monsters throughout the forest till he finds what he's looking for. A poisonous herb called the Screeching Flower that will slowly raise his magic power. He goes on to find several more flowers and consume them on the way to his ultimate goal here, Jigui, the massive beast made of countless spirits he saw atop the mountain before. According to Iroh, one of his trainers from the underworld, obtaining its jewel eye will grant him the world-ending flame. After finding its nest, Changxian decides to set some traps before it returns. Unfortunately for Changxian, 10 days pass with no sign of Jigui. Instead, several other kinds of monsters keep gathering and dying to his traps. Deciding to move on and try something else, Changxian jumps off the peak, only to run into Baek Gyeowul. Changxian instantly engages him in battle, not wanting news of his actions getting out. During their fight, Changxian discovers that Gyeowul knows a technique called Secret Art of the Shadow, a power used by Xerxes, one of the 4 shadows Changxian called allies before going mad as a god. When he asks how Gyeowul knows it, the man loses his composure and furiously demands to know how Changxian's even aware of the power. Though a fierce battle ensues, Changxian eventually combines the White Tiger basic skills to reveal Tiger Bearing and defeats Gaia-Wool. Upon closer inspection, he realizes Gaia-Wool must be a child of Xerxes. His powers are something he was born with, so he doesn't even know what they really are. In fact, he's after Jigui's jewel because he thinks it can cure his cursed appearance that comes with being a ghost-born. Changxian tells him that won't work, but offers something else instead. If Gaia-Wool supports him against Jigui, he himself will cure his curse. To prove his words true, Changxian goes on to literally burn the curse right out of Gaia-Wool's being with the flames of the 8 trigrams urn within him. After allying, the two head to Jigui's nest for clues. There they find all the riches it's hoarded like a dragon. While Changxian loots a highly powerful bow and a dark item called an illusion pearl, Gaia-Wool figures out the beast has gone deeper in the mountains to feed on strong monsters. 4 days later, the duo arrive at Jigui's location to see it rampaging. As the two prepare to attack it, Huju grants them the beast sense ability as he's pleased with their actions. Desperate to stay in his good graces, Pabel Sag also ends up gifting Changxian her own power, 100% bullseye. Between his own power, the bows, and the god's blessings, Changxian's attack wounds Jigui greatly right off the bat. Eager to end the beast, he and Gaia-Wool rush to its position, only to be stopped. A pair of instructors have intruded on the boss fight and claim trainees aren't allowed here. Due to their interference, Jigui manages to escape. While Gaia-Wool pleads with the instructors, Changxian wonders if this attempt to keep him from a specific area has anything to do with the illusion pearl that had to be involved in something dark. That aside, he finds a loophole in the instructor's orders and unleashes the full might of the 8 trigrams urn. With its infinite hunger for all flames, it sucks up the fire attribute Jigui's essence little by little. Though it's very taxing on his body, Changxian eventually absorbs so much fire that he can finally unsheathe his ultimate weapon. The now rusty sword of the first Uyezi, the Yuchan sword, shall now be unleashed. With a combination of the world-ending flames and his own blood, Changxian awakens the blade and binds it to himself. Once the sword is unified with him, he uses it to take down the Jigui with ease. Not only does he acquire its jewel eye and impress all the watching gods, he also raises his magic power by nearly 3 times. On top of that, he receives a quest. He must protect the Yukon sword from those who'd steal it while also looking for the other 8 swords of Uyezi. Once he unites them all, he will attain the ultimate weapon and power. Additionally, all his blade skills shoot right up to the highest levels and combine to form sword mastery. Behind him, the instructors start scheming to take him out and get info on the illusion pearl. Before they can do anything though, another group arrives and starts mocking them all. These new guys are actually members of High Off here for their own nefarious reasons. Together, they attack the instructors and kill one of them. When they move to attack Changxian, however, he reveals something troubling. The mate of the Jigui that just died is coming with an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. The second it reaches them, the High Off members and remaining instructor are forced to flee the overpowered beast. Now alone, Gaia-Wool asks what Changxian will do. Changxian tells him he's going to get another jewel eye and reveals the reason he's so confident. He consumes the dead Jigui's eye and almost instantly, a change occurs. The 8 trigrams urn within him assimilates the properties of the Jigui. Combined with all the other attributes within it, it has now become the urn of world-ending flame, sporting the ruin attribute. On top of the slew of fire and death element skills he suddenly has, Changxian also transforms into a Jigui himself. With his power flaring, he shoots up into the sky and after his latest prey. With his newfound abilities, Changxian dispatches both the Jigui and the High Off members with ease, leaving one alive. After absorbing the Jigui's eye and gaining the title Jigui's Vessel, he turns to the remaining High Off member. By interrogating him, he learns that White Tiger are after the contents of the 7 cryptic scriptures of San, divine artifacts that allow one to summon the strength of ancient constellations from the creation of the cosmos itself. Of the 3 in their possession, they've only unlocked 2. The third remains locked as it requires none other than Peter's key, which unknown to anyone is in Changxian's possession. That aside, the first scripture details a method of turning people into mindless super soldiers by using illusion pearls as a medium. This mountain range hides a research facility for creating such soldiers, and the High Off guys were sent to retrieve the illusion pearl stolen by the Jigui. After killing the High Off guy, He turns to the one remaining instructor to learn about the facility where the super soldiers are created. When the man refuses to comply and speaks of his god, Huju reveals his disappointment in his pitiful state and takes Changxian's side. Moving on, Changxian puts Gyowol into the lotus position and initiates the technique needed to fully purge the last traces of his curse. Pushed into his own mind, Gyowol struggles against the painful memories of his past, his suffering, and ostracized existence. Thanks to Changxian's words, though, he's able to stay strong. Out in the real world, Changxian puts up an invisibility barrier to hide them and decides on something. It's time to deal with the witness that's been tailing him since the library. After catching up to the fleeing spy, Changxian brutally impales him before force-feeding him the illusion pearl. This wipes away his soul and turns him into a puppet for Changxian to control. At his order, the spy agrees to tell Executive Director Osi-wan that nothing's out of the ordinary. Finally, before he leaves, Changxian has him teach him the stealth technique he's been using, Flying Tiger's Trailing Gale. With his new skill granting him control of wind, Changxian takes off to return to Gyowol with enhanced movements. Meanwhile, Pabalsag rummages around to find a hunting skill that'll go well with these new movements. Using his newfound movement skill, Changxian arrives at the Jigui nest where he finds exactly what he suspected, the egg of the two Jigui from earlier, something that happens only once a century. Since Jigui can grow into all sorts of forms based on their needs, desire, and surroundings, he decides to take this egg and hatch it as a companion for him. Once more unleashing the 8 trigrams urn, he absorbs the egg and all its energy into his own body so it may hatch at a later time in his preferred form. Sometime later, after searching for a while and listening to Pabalsag and Huju constantly argue over him, he finally finds the research facility whose rough location he forced out of the instructor. Thanks to his new stealth skill and insane speed, Changxian manages to fly right through the facility without being detected by any of the several traps inside. After using beast sense to eavesdrop on the several conversations, he learns 2 things. The facility is about to have a surprise inspection that has them all panicking over their illegal actions. And second, the place where the super soldier and illusion pearl production takes place. Once he enters the massive room, he's faced with the sight of tons of people that have been abducted and turned into mindless puppets. Disgusted by the sight, the righteous goddess Minerva pleads with him to destroy this horrible place. If he accepts her request, she'll grant him an appropriate blessing, possibly even a power of her own. Faced with a choice between losing Minerva's favor or Huju's, Changxian speaks up before deciding. Addressing Huju, he says that he has something to ask of him.
Hey viewers, subscribe for more quality content.